when everybody's telling you you're ace, you're the leader of the pack and you're brilliant, it doesn't take long before you start believing it. When you're told there's categorically no God, and you've grown up in an MTV, a celebrity culture, and now suddenly you have everything, page-free girlfriends and all these things, and everyone's going, I wish I had your life. You're so busy looking down on everyone else, you don't really look up anymore, I found.
Hey, welcome everybody. This is Simon Gilbo with Inspired, and I'm really excited this week because we've got Warren Furman with us. Warren Furman's a name probably won't ring bells to you until I relate it to the Gladiator show. So he was Ace back in it. Warren, hi, by the way. When was that? Was that in the mid-80s, late 80s?
It was 1927. Well, actually, it feels like 1927, Simon. It was actually finished in 2000.
Right. How many years did it run?
It went from 1994 to 2000. It was given a lifespan of 3 years, but actually it ran for a lot longer.
Because it was so popular.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was my staple. I seem to remember Saturday nights, we'd sit around with Cilla Black and Blind Date, and then you came after that, didn't you?
Yes, yeah, but it wasn't live. People thought it was live, but it wasn't. It was all filmed in like a month. And which was lovely because I only had to work a month a year, which was a dream job for me.
Wow. So, well, we'll come to all that in a second, but that's what you're known for. But obviously, there's so much more to you than that now, and it's been an amazing journey, which we're all really looking forward to hearing. So, Warren, let's just go back. Tell us a bit about your upbringing and how things panned out back then.
Okay, so I grew up on a council estate in Harlow, just outside, in Essex, just outside London, one of four brothers. My dad was a roofer, and it seemed at that time, Simon, everyone was a roofer in Harlow. Most people got on the M11, went into London and fixed roofs, and I hated it. My dad said, you will all be roofers, and I just thought, I don't want to be a roofer. I was a skinny kid. It was always raining, My dad said the secret to happiness is to work hard and play hard, but actually we didn't really have a happy upbringing because of the bad weather and, the oversupply of roofers from Harlow. We were always skin. So I wanted to do anything other than roofing. It was a dangerous job as well. I didn't like heights. And so it caused a bit of tension with me and Dad growing up because he would take all my brothers to work at the weekend or in the school holidays, and I would resist it. And so I'd say, oh no, I want to be a policeman. I want to do anything except roofing. And so he said to me, well, if you don't have a job by the time you're 16, I'm kicking you out. And I thought that was a bit harsh at the time, and I didn't really understand it. But looking back, Simon, I realised, it's my dad's, he loved me, and that was his fear. He believed that skills pay the bills. Academically, none of us, me or my brothers, weren't great. I didn't know it at the time, but I know now that I have attention deficit disorder, so I couldn't, although, I wasn't daft, I just couldn't retain information, especially if I wasn't interested in it. And so, yeah, he saw all those things, and he just wanted us to be roofers, which I really resisted.
Does that mean you were a nightmare at school with teachers messing around?
Not really, because my oldest brother, he was a tearaway. Because my dad had sort of taught him a trade, he realised he didn't really need school. So he'd just mess about there, and he used to play up with the teachers, and that made him popular. So he'd always have the bad school reports. And as a contrast, because I knew there was this pressure on me to, get somewhere academically, I used to try. But unfortunately, like I say, the teachers would say that I was doing all right. But then when it came to exam time and that, I would just fail it, or I just couldn't seem to retain that information. So it was really frustrating, actually, because like I say, all my brothers had, a lot of our identity when we were growing up. We grew up the MTV generation, so our identity was in money and looks, the brands that we could wear. My brothers had all Nike and Sergio Tacchini. Can you remember that, Simon? Sergio Tacchini. Okay. Well, where we were, if you were wearing Sergio Tacchini, you had made it, And so I didn't have all that. I just had hand-me-downs. My brothers had Farrahs. I had Tarras, the cheap alternative.
Right.
and so it was mixed emotions really going through school, because I thought, well, none of my brothers are trying at school and they're all doing all right. And I'm trying. And it's a real struggle. And again, as I say, I was a shy kid. I was a skinny kid. I was bullied. And so, we had one of my brothers died when I was growing up. And when that happened, Mum and Dad said, there is no God. If there was a God, your brother wouldn't have died. And it was at that point they stopped saying, God bless to us and stuff like that. Not that they were ever religious or anything, but there was just definitely a hardness came in. And then mum and dad started to drink a bit more at the weekends. I think they were in arrested development with a grieving process. So instead of going to God to find out why this had happened, they went to the doctors, and the doctors prescribed antidepressants. So I didn't know at the time, Simon, but these things started to sort of build up at the weekends, and I felt like sort of we lost our parents at that point. And so I just started to think, well, what's the purpose of life? I don't want to be a roofer. There's no God. I started to look into, tarot cards and these things. And I was really confused, actually. But the one thing that did fill that spot, like I say, being part of the MTV generation, that was always on our television at home. And I thought, well, if it's all about looks and all about money and it's all about the fame game, maybe, if I don't want to live happy ever after, I'll just get rich and famous. And back when I was growing up, the highest paid movie star in history was Arnold Schwarzenegger, by far. And Sylvester Stallone, with First Blood and the Rambo film. So I looked at that, and as far as I could see, they were lifting weights. There was no particular, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I didn't see any particular acting skills with Arnie. I just thought, if I can go to the gym, build up to muscles and become a movie star, that's surely a good way to spend your life. You only get one life. You want to live rich. I mean, a lot of these were Arnold's sayings. You want a fabulous life. You've got to go. You've got to get it. So. But
you said you were a skinny Ray.
Yeah. But then I looked back at pictures of my idol Arnie, and he was a skinny kid, and Sylvester Stallone, they were skinny kids. You could change this, and this is very much, I think, today's culture. You can be what you want to be, and so I consumed that fully. I thought, well, I'll be what I want to be, and I want to be a superstar, and I want to have muscles like him. No one would start on him or give him a beating at school. So I started going to the gym. Well, I used to sneak into the gym because I didn't have the money to get in, so I'd climb over the back, go through the squash courts and start lifting a few weights, and I immediately started to see a change in my body. And it gave me a confidence, Simon. And people started to say, well, you look good. Wow, look. And, I started to get these muscles, and I started to notice that at school people stopped picking on me. They would ask me, do you lift weights? How do you lift them? What are you doing? And I thought, actually, this is great. People are thinking twice about punching me. Instead, they want to be my friend. And so my identity really started to come out of that. I was the lad at school that wanted to be a bodybuilder. I wanted to lift weights. And I started to get a little bit of popularity for it as well. So I thought, this is great. This is a win-win.
So at home, you said, things were not going well. Your parents were drinking a lot. They were sort of in arrested development, use that word. And so was it your escape? And did Dad have to follow through on his threats of kicking you out in the end?
Yeah, so Dad was true to his word. School finished. I came away with not great GCSEs that were going to get me into no job. And what compounded that was we were in a recession. So even Dad didn't have any work. He put his faith in his work. And now he was struggling. There was, in Harlow, there's a queue going around. It was like the full Monty, you go to the job centre and it was queuing around the block. It was really grim. And to compound that even more, Maggie Thatcher had put a poll tax out there. So although I'd registered as homeless and I was living in a hostel, the Young Women's Christian Association, the YWCA in Harlow, I was still culpable for the poll tax. So I thought, this is one grim existence. Not only am I now homeless, I've now got no money, and they're wanting to take anything I do get off me. So I was getting angry with the system as well. But the one place where I got respite was going into the gym and having that dream, looking up at the posters on the wall of Schwarzenegger and lifting the weights, feeling good about myself. And of course, we are meant to be doing something. We're given these bodies for a reason, and we are meant to look after them by exercising. So the benefits of exercise were great. My friends at this point were going out and drinking to escape their problems, smoking pot or whatever else. And I was going to the gym, and of course, all that's detrimental to building a physique. So it was a bit of a blessing at that point, actually, because the gym definitely made me feel good. There was no steroids at that point. I was believing the commercial agenda. I was buying all the Joe Wader books and all the Schwarzenegger books and eating all the products that I could afford, which weren't many, but I believed I could look like one of my idols if I just put in the hard work and I just focus, believe, receive, achieve, you can do it. And I think it took, a good couple of years of that before I realised, actually, this is a hoax. I can't look like these superstars, if I want to be celebrated in a celebrity culture, I've got to be different to everybody else. We're individuals, but for me to be different, I have to look like Schwarzenegger. Nobody really looks like him. Or just an elite few, at train at Venice Beach in California. And so I did more and more research. And then I saw somewhere a video of Arnold Schwarzenegger that I think he had probably tried to delete, of him admitting that he'd taken steroids. And that was a real heartbreaker for me, because I was like, oh no, you've got to take steroids to look like that. But I'd come so far. I mean, I'd put all my eggs in that basket. I think I was at the point of no return.
So is that the truth then? So basically everybody who's got, those amazing ripped bodies has to do steroids to get them?
Well, I would say there's no sport of professional bodybuilding without anabolic steroids. And so I found it was rife. And the more freaky someone looks, it don't matter how many eggs you eat or how much milk you drink or tuna fish, your body's quite resilient. And I found that bodybuilding, hypertrophy is your body's response to an injury. And the body's a very clever thing. It wants to revert back to normal as soon as possible. So if you want to look like, oversized and freaky, you're actually in an injured state. So a lot of people don't realize that, but you put on all these muscles, but it's more weight for your body to carry around, and it doesn't naturally want to do all that. So you have to resort to something unnatural, to get your body that anabolic, to get yourself looking that freaky. Having said that, I'm not sitting here saying that there's no bodybuilders out there that don't take anabolic steroids. But I found that to get anywhere in that sport, this was a sacrifice you'd have to take. And a bit like in business, the bigger the risk, the bigger the payoff. And like I say, I trained harder than anybody else in that gym. I'm sure of it. I spent all my hours in there. I was eating the right foods, taking the right products. And nothing really changed. I just ended up with like a physique like Bruce Lee. I was ripped, like a chicken that had been cooked. Yeah. But I didn't have these great big bulging muscles that you could see through clothes and that. So I had to go into the black market and forage into the illegal world of self-administration of and abusing anabolic steroids, which was unfortunate. But, put yourself in a situation where you're now hopeless, you're in a recession, your dad's kicked you out, he's told you you're going to be a loser if you don't learn a trade. You found out your idols are not really who they say they are with regard to, you ain't going to have this fabulous life unless you make the sacrifice that needs to be made, which is injecting yourself with a 2-inch intramuscular injection every week.
Right. So were you deeply disillusioned by that stage, or despair? What were the emotions?
Massively, yeah, massively. Because, I sort of prided myself at that point that my friends were into taking ecstasy, was about then. So the weekend had come, they'd go out to a rave and I would never do those things, and they would drink too much and they were smoking, anything to sort of fit in. Whereas I very much shunned it and said, my body's a bit of a temple, I want to look like these stars and stuff. Now all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I've tried to keep myself pure. And it's all been an illusion. I've been buying all this stuff, invested, putting all my faith in this sport and, becoming a celebrity bodybuilder that, and now it's a hoax. It's all built on nothing. I have to actually injure my body and, abuse it with substance that's illegal for me to get anywhere. So that was really confusing. But like I say, I was at the point of no return. So it was like, well, it's all or nothing now, isn't it? Either just give up. And I've got to say, it was a hopeless situation. Because the first course of anabolic steroids I bought, my girlfriend then left me. She found them. Oh, no. My first girlfriend.
Well, good girl.
I know, love of my life. And she found these syringes in a cupboard. And she was like, my mum said you was a loser. She's right. And off she went as well. I was like, man, I am such a loser, So it was bittersweet, actually, because, taking them anabolic steroids changed everything. And I'm not condoning drug use, not by a long shot. These things are addictive, they're damaging.
Was the change overnight?
Pretty much, yeah. You start taking these and it completely alters your body state from, into an anabolic state where your body can now build muscle at a very fast rate to any level, that really you want. You can start sculpting your body and turn yourself into a superhero. To me, it was the wonder drug. I put this. The hard bit for me was, injecting. So from taking no drugs, not even a pill or smoking, to suddenly having to put an injection in yourself, you know, in a hostel, I felt like such a loser, Simon. I was like, this is so grim. And I'm squeamish. But I'm like, this is such a grim thing to have to do. But that just shows, I think, how desperate I was at that point to break out of that working class trap that I was in. Yeah. I say working class, I didn't even have a job. Just that trap that I was in, that was all I could see really was poverty and no hope.
So, and you're not condoning it, but it did work, didn't it? So how did the Gladiator thing kick off?
So then started training on, you know, taking this anabolic edge. Everything changed. I then became significantly different to everybody else. So because I trained naturally as far as I could, I think that helped my physique. So as soon as I did take anabolic steroids, a lot of people who take them quickly, you know, and they'll gain a lot of weight and a lot of water, and then they'll come off them and lose it all. Because I already had this good base by, you know, taking these steroids then, and then all of a sudden I literally did look like Superman over, you know, the first course of steroids, which I think was 6 or 8 weeks. I literally doubled in size, and people were like, you look incredible. You look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I was like, this is it. This is just what I needed to do. And so it was after that I started to write into, you know, different, I think Man Oh Man was on, which was a TV show where it was really sexist, actually. You know, all these guys would stand near a swimming pool and these girls would come out and choose one. The one they didn't like, they just push him in a swimming pool. But they had a guy on there that used to flex his muscles. I thought I could do that. And then Gladiators was on TV, like we said earlier, you know, the biggest show, the first reality TV game show, incidentally, back when there was just, you know, 4 channels, I think. One channel had all the money. That was London Weekend Television. Great big production, massively popular. 16 million people would watch that regular. I thought, now that's the one. If I can get on that show as a gladiator, I've really cracked it, because that's the springboard to get to Hollywood, to be like Schwarzenegger. And I'd already noticed that some of the gladiators already done that. There was Mark Smith, who was Trojan. He had managed to get over to LA, and he was now had a contract with Hasbro, and he was playing Action Man. So it was all adventure, you know. But the address that they left at the end of the TV show was to be a contestant. So, like, you know, it's a bit like the reality shows now. You know, you can email in and be on the show, but I wanted to be a star of the show. You know, I just thought, well, there's no point in going on, and it's nice to win a Jeep and a few quid and a holiday, but if you could become one of those gladiators, that's it, you've made it. I remember Gladiator Wolf, and he wasn't particularly, you know, muscle-wise, he wasn't that big, but he was the biggest star of the show, and he even had a spitting image puppet made of him. And I thought, wow, he's a mega star. If you can have a spitting image puppet made of you, you've really made it.
Yeah, you arrived.
I think the only barrier for me, Simon, is that I was incredibly introverted. And I thought, you know, how do you go from really not knowing anyone, you know, having this little insular life, an island of a person, going to the gym, lifting weights, bit of a misfit, to suddenly being catapulted in front of 16 million people, 10,000 people live, you know, wearing nothing but this tiny little lycra, like gymnast suit. I mean, how are you going to make that step? So I didn't think that would be possible, but I wrote that letter in. I was invited to a gladiator tryout. I went to the tryout, 60 other hopefuls, 60 fellas, built like barn doors, all trying to beat the granny out of each other. And amazingly, John Anderson, the referee, came over and told me I had the job. And I just couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. And it was life-changing overnight.
Hi folks, I hope you're enjoying all these inspiring stories as much as I am. If you enjoy the podcast, I'd love it if you give us a top quality rating on iTunes so that more people get to hear about it. And if you want to contact me, you can get me on simongilbo.com and the other social media platforms. Now let's get back to the podcast. So you got picked up by a limo at your YWCA, is that right?
You've done your research, Simon. Yeah, so once I got the job, they flew me to the Gladiator training camp in Mauritius. And so, yeah, a big Mercedes stretch limousine picked me up at the YWCA and took me to Heathrow Airport, where I met Jet. And, you know, she was more beautiful in real life than she was on the TV. I was like, whoa. And then Wolf shaking me hand, how you doing? Are you all right? I was like, no way, this is incredible. First class, getting on that, you know, getting in going into a first class lounge. And then getting on that, and then flying for 10 hours, whatever it was, to Mauritius, where they said it's a training camp. It wasn't. It was just a party, really. It was incredible. You know, it was, I say to people, it's like, I haven't won a lottery before, but I suppose like winning a lottery, only better. Because, you know, everything, I was like a kid in a sweet shop. Everything was there for you. You know, you could have anything that you wanted. And nothing was a worry anymore. So I went from being, living in fear, I'm not going to have this, I'm not going to have that, I'm not good enough, I want to be accepted, to suddenly being, Ace from Gladiators. And now all of a sudden I had fans, I was idolized, and I was on my way to Hollywood as far as I was concerned. This was incredible.
And why did you choose the name Ace?
I didn't choose it, actually. The producers suggested it. I didn't like it. I thought it was rubbish. You got the Mighty Warrior and, the Hunter and all of these. And then I thought, and he's facing Ace. It just sounds rubbish. So I really pushed against that. And so I said, okay, you come up with something better, but very difficult to come up with a name that could potentially stick with you for the rest of your life. And I remember Trojan saying to me, be very careful when you choose your Gladiator name, because you have to be commercially savvy. You're not just a VIP now, you're a CIP. You're a commercially important person. So you have to choose a clever name that brands are going to associate with, because that's what this is. Show business is a business. So you've got to think business-wise. I thought, wow, I didn't realise. I thought show business was, that's it. You live happy ever after. And he said, given my time, I'll give you this advice, because given my time again, I would have chosen a different name. I said, you're kidding me. The Mighty Wooden Horse of Trojan, that's a brilliant name. The history behind it and everything else. He said, yeah, but Warren, I moved to America where I'm Action Man, and in America, the name Trojan is a condom.
Classic.
So condom, I was like, okay, I could see how that could be a problem. And so I like I say, I really pushed against the name Ace, but they kept pushing it. And then I remember Nigel Lithgow and Ken Warwick saying to me, look, you really should go with Ace. I said, I've spoke to lots of people. It's a bit of a rubbish name. I've got some alternatives. And then they said to me, McVitie's biscuits are bringing out a new biscuit, and they're going to call it the Ace. And if you take the name Ace, you will get lots and lots of money in advertising revenue. And I said, I love the name Ace, Nigel. I love the name Ace. And so I got that. But I've got to say, Simon, I did sell out commercially, because what I didn't know at that time, it was great when I was putting the money in the bank, but the first TV advert that came out, and you can find this, you can Google it, it's embarrassing.
I've seen it, yeah.
It just came out, the strapline was the incredibly thick chocolate biscuit. So you can imagine. I couldn't even say, from Essex, I couldn't even say thick. I was like, oh, I'll be the thick biscuit then. And people used to shout out to me, oh, thick biscuit. And I was like, this is a nightmare. I've completely sold out commercially and regretting it, just as Trojan foresaw.
So it was, you talk about it being a business, and it was hard, wasn't it? It wasn't all the positive perks.
Yeah, I thought I'd live happily ever after, but what I found is that money and that fame actually separated me from people. And looking back, I realised that I wanted to be accepted by people. This is why I was bodybuilding. I wanted to be part of a community. I wanted friends. I was looking for identity. And I didn't know where that identity lay, so I just thought, well, if I'm like Arnold Schwarzenegger and I can have his fabulous life, that would be great. But actually, I noticed that when they call it the trappings of fame, I actually did feel trapped. I started to recognise that all my real friends started to sort of disappear from me. And I had tons of new friends, but I knew they were friends with Ace. They wanted to be associated with this successful person that was on television. That made me feel really empty. It made me feel lonely, especially with romantic relationships, because like I say, my girlfriend had left me. Now I was on the TV as, this TV star, and I had girls queuing up to be my girlfriend, but they were my girlfriends, but I knew they were with me for Ace, so I used to put them through these weird tests, and it started to corrupt me as a person. On the outside, I looked like I had everything, I looked like the perfect person with all these muscles and suntans and the right clothes, the right cars. On the inside, I was morally bankrupt, actually, spiritually bankrupt. And confused, actually. I just thought, well, this isn't all it was cracked up to be. And actually, I was living a life of fear, Simon. I was like, when this show ends, which it will, everything's finite. When this show ends, what happens to me? Ace goes, then who am I? Do I just have to fall back into a normal life? I've got no skills to pay the bills. Will I have to just go onto a building site? And so I was scared to death that I would lose this job. And also, as I said, my whole identity was wrapped up in it. And I think this is why you see a lot of these, real fast turnaround reality TV shows now having so much carnage behind them.
Yeah.
People have catapulted to stardom very fast. and then it's all pulled away from them very fast. And then you're seeing this massive rate of suicides, young suicides, and it's tragic. And I just don't think the production companies have caught up with the gravity of the impact that this is having on people.
Yeah, and so I mean, did you, with friendships, knowing that there are lots of fake friends, but did you manage to sort of deceive yourself into thinking you were that amazing? Because I think you talk about your real friends pulling away, saying, you're not who you were, and sort of believing in what people were saying about you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real, when everybody's telling you you're ace, you're the leader of the pack and you're brilliant, it doesn't take long before you start believing it. And when you can have anything you want in life, bear in mind, mum and dad said there's no God, and be careful of Bible bashers, and we all lived behind the settee when there was a knock at the door and someone was stood there in a tie that we thought might be trying to push some religion on us. When you're told there's categorically no God, and you've grown up in an MTV, a celebrity culture, a consumer culture, and now suddenly you have everything, you've got page-free girlfriends and all these things, and everyone's going, I wish I had your life. You're so busy looking down on everyone else, you don't really look up anymore, I found. I'm looking down on everyone going, yeah, well, what you're doing wrong is this. Yeah, well, what you need is bigger arms. If you had a bigger chest, you wouldn't get bullied. Well, what you need to do is this. You need to wear this. And of course, there's the commercial agenda as well. These commercial companies were giving me free stuff, I'm really selling that to my friends. So I had lots of new friends, and real friends moved away from me. But I understand that now. I didn't then. But I mean, it must have been horrible for them. They're out working all week long, trying to aspire to be a success, or what the world says is a success, getting into the best clubs, getting the right clothes, and if you don't know God and you're putting your faith into money and looks, I had all of those things in abundance. And so you can see how that would depress them, and they're like, oh, it's all right for you, you've got everything. We're just trying to, aspire to that. And so I used to think maybe they're jealous then. I'm inviting them to all these clubs, I'm getting them in for free. And so I had I had all these new friends that wanted to be associated with Ace. And I thought, well, why do I want all these old friends that are just whinging and moaning and telling me I'm not the same person, and they're getting a bit needy? Whereas all these new friends were always doing stuff for me. I'll pick you up, I'll drop you off. What do you need? Come here, come there. And I thought, well, I just want this exciting life. And remember that when your life's that high, when you're catapulted to fame in front of 16 million people, you walk out in the streets and everyone knows your name. Normal life loses its edge. Normal life for me was completely boring. Yeah. So I don't want this. I wasn't in a real world anymore. I was now, like I say, I was trying to promote my identity as someone famous. And that's a spurious place to go. Newspapers asking you for salacious stories every day and saying, we'll pay you for them. Would you? And I'm saying, but I ain't got any salacious stories. Oh, well, maybe if you was with a page-free girl, so then I get engaged to a page-free girl, and then we get up each morning, we make stories up, and we sell lies to newspapers. And I'm rewarded for that. So what does that tell a young man and a young mind? My dad's saying to me at this point, actually, son, I was wrong. And you're right. I told you that the secret to a happy life is to work hard. He said, you can earn more, in a week than I can in a month. And you can you do what you want when you want. Everyone loves you. Look at me. Who am I? And, it's really humble of him to say that. And at the time I thought, yeah, I'm glad he's acknowledged it in this. But that's how conceited I was. The reality was, my head was firmly stuck into my backside. Yeah. And my dad was a real honest person, and he was contributing to the world. He was actually, putting roofs on people's houses. And what was I? I was just part of this consumer culture that says, you have to change and deform your body and be somebody you're not in order to be a success. Yeah. And so it's a strange place to be.
So I think I remember you saying that, you sort of would get paid to make up these lies and stack loads of cash. I mean, that just shows, doesn't it, just how utterly screwed up the system is, and how when we read tabloids, you really got to recognise that most of it is absolute tosh, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think when people ask me about that now, I always say, well, you're part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And what I mean by that is, a lot of these tabloids exist because there's a market for them. And by, I remember News of the World. My mum always used to buy News of the World, until she started seeing me slapped across the front of it. And she's like, it's a horrible paper. Yeah. And I was like, they build you up, but then they break you down. But, there's clearly an appetite for this stuff. A lot of people complain about a lot of reality TV shows and say, listen, if you don't tune into them, they will stop making them. And I think that's the answer to this stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's a whole market out there that's trying to get people. I think they call it now the attention economy. You know, everyone's trying to get attention. And, you know, all of these magazines with these super lives, these glamorous lives, it was my experience, it was all based on lies, all of it, you know, all the way up to the A-list celebrities, all of it, you know, the same incestuous little group getting into relationships, selling their souls, different stories to keep themselves relevant, because their whole identity is, I am a superstar, I need to stay a superstar, I want to stay ahead of the game, I want to be chosen for the best film. So, you know, I think that it goes all the way up the line.
Yeah.
We just had a little helicopter buzzing around here. Apparently Tom Cruise has been landing in Pickering filming Mission Impossible 7. I thought we were still on 1 or 2, but apparently we're on 7. But that interests me because, you know, here's a guy who's the head of, well, he's not the head of Scientology, but he's like their superstar, as is John Travolta. You know, and we're talking Scientology, which really is a religion for celebrity. You know, so, you know, you've got these other diversions, and someone once said to me, success has a way of taking you places where your character won't sustain you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened to me. And so it'd be interesting to meet someone like Tom Cruise and see how he manages to sustain his character with that amount of adulation.
Yeah, yeah. And just, you know, you mentioned just now about those reality shows. It very interestingly, I think it was the first Big Brother ever. So we're going back early 2000s. And the first winner was a Scottish guy called Callum. I don't know if you remember watching that one. I mean, I've never watched any of them. I honestly can't stand them. But he won it, and he was a follower of Jesus. He was a full-on follower of Jesus.
Wow.
And the producers afterwards said, we will never again have a Christian on the show because it's not seedy enough. There's not enough bitchiness and you know, all that sort of stuff. Which is like, come on, people. You're watching, you know, sewage, basically. It's like people are picked on the sort of the ability to wind each other up and how they're going to be clashes. And that's absolute voyeurism. It's debasing our humanity. I obviously, you can tell I feel strongly about those reality shows. I don't put Gladiators in the same bracket because that was pretty wholesome, I reckon.
Well, you need to now, because a very good friend of mine who was Hunter in Gladiators has just competed in The Circle, which is probably the biggest reality TV show at the moment. And interestingly enough, he has no faith, but he's seen such a change in my life in the last 7 years. He regularly rings me for advice, especially moral advice. And I remember him ringing me about that show that he was going to go on The Circle, and he was going to be what's called a catfish. Do you know what one of those is? Okay, it's where you pretend to be somebody you're not. And so, like you say, these shows, they can be bear baiting. You know, they're looking for jeopardy, so they're looking for drama. And I advised him against it. And I was like, listen, you know, these shows have a way of, you know, putting your personal up for public consumption. And if there's anything in you that's not nice, it will be bad, you know, and it will not be nice. And he did this show against my recommendation, actually. But the whole thing wasn't a pleasant experience for him in the end. No, it wasn't at all.
Well, listen. So you dated Katie Price. I don't know who else you dated, but so you're living the absolute dream for us lads. You know, that we possibly aspire to as teenagers, as young men, and then you've tasted and seen that it is not good. What was the turnaround?
The show ending, really. So, and what I mean by that is, at the time, I thought, you know, it's like my world had fallen apart. Everything came crashing down. You know, all the friends suddenly went, the celebrity girlfriends, you know, the bank manager's like, how are you going to pay this mortgage? And I'm like, well, this ain't good. And then I'm going to my dad saying, can you give us a day's work? I don't really know what I'm going to do at this point. I expected like Hollywood to be knocking on my door. I had no idea that you had to have a talent to be, you know, to be celebrated. I just thought, you know, I was part of a reality show. But you think about it, I had no, you know, a lot of people are celebrated, and celebrity's great if you're celebrated for the right reasons, you know, but I was celebrated really for hitting people over the head with a big stick. And when you go into the job centre and tell them that you want, you know, £2,000 an hour to hit someone with a big stick, there's not many jobs like that around. No. So I hit the ground with a thud. And I think this is where a lot of people come off the rails. You know, they turn to drugs because their lives were so high and they just can't. And I was the same. You just can't really swallow your pride enough, humble yourself enough to say, actually, that wasn't the real world. this is the real world. You've got to play a part. You've got to be, got to be productive in society. What can I do? How can I contribute? But I didn't. I just thought, well, I've got to be owed a living. I'm the ace. I'm the leader of the pack. What am I going to do now? What am I going to get onto? And I think, I started to look in TV and look at different possibilities. But I was not, like I say, I was introverted. I was no presenter. So I thought, well, okay, all my friends seem to be getting on now. They seem to have an element of happiness. They're getting married. They're settling down. They're buying houses. They get having families. They've got steady jobs. So I trained as a site manager at Simon. Started doing the 9 to 5, managing building sites, building houses, and it was quite a decent job. And I trained for it. I did the training and stuff. But it wasn't long before I just felt like my parents before me. I thought, I feel like I'm on a mortgage march to the grave. I looked up the word mortgage and it said death march. Yeah. And I thought, I'm on a death march. I'm just collecting stuff now, including a house, which when I die, it's going to be ripped away from me and given to someone else who hasn't earned it. This is madness.
Yeah.
And I was, like I say, I was blessed to have seen the red carpets and the glitter and the show business life and all this. And I see that was nonsense. And so that's when I really started to ask the big questions, what is it all about? Clearly, like I say, on the outside, I had everything, but spiritually, I was empty. I could feel that something was missing. And so I went on a real spiritual search, looking everywhere except the Bible and looking at and Jesus Christ. We didn't want anything to do with those. But I really liked the idea, I'd say I was, a seeker. I really liked the idea of a lot of these esoteric teachings and the Gnostic teachings and the Buddhism and the Taoism. And, I remember reading the Celestine prophecy. I really got, seduced by the idea that there's something else there. There's a power, there's a secret, the Rhonda Bryan stuff. There's a secret and you can have it. You've just got to have this special knowledge. And so I spent a good couple of years, I say wasting time. A lot of these were quite good because I took a bit of time out reading, but I did notice that the majority of these teachings, they all talk about Jesus, and it irritated me every time I saw Jesus in any of these teachings because I was like, why have you got to start ripping his teachings off, and then pointing to yourself? So the Buddha maybe mention Jesus, but then point to the Buddha, or these different gurus. And so that bugged me. But what I did notice after a couple of years of spending a lot of time, effort and money on going on these different courses to be liberated, to improve self, I did a lot of self-help as well. The giant steps, you can do it, you can be it. But I started to see that actually I just had to keep writing checks for somebody at the end of it. And I started to feel like a lot of it, even atheism, was like a Ponzi scheme. You can read your Hawkins and your Dawkins, but at the end of it, you've read this big, thick book where they're telling you categorically there's no God, but then they've got no answer to what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They come up with all these great big ideas, but they're all theories. They give you nothing at the end. And I thought, right, I've had enough of this.
By this stage, you're married to Dee, aren't you? We met last year at J. John's conference. We had lunch together. She seems like a really calm, moderating influence. Was it all plain sailing there?
No, because again, I was in today's culture, I didn't believe in marriage. 50% of marriages fail on paper. That's a fact. God's completely been taken out of marriage. And so, I like that analogy of if I said to you, do you want to come skydiving with me? But 50% of parachutes don't open. We're not going skydiving, are we?
No.
And so that's very much how I saw marriage. I was like, well, why would I do that? I'll commit to this person that, as I watch her grow old and lose her looks, that at the same time, if I do anything out of line or my eyes wander anywhere else, she can take half of my stuff. It just seemed madness to me. And so, I was very much along one of the believers that, well, if we love each other, we shouldn't need a bit of paper to prove it. And so I went down those lines initially. So it was we had a strained relationship because obviously, she wanted security. She wanted to get married. She loved me. She knew I loved her. But again, I was still being led by fear. It was like, well, I've had enough heartbreaks to know what it feels like. And I don't want to be heartbroken again, have all my stuff taken off me and then end back up at the YWCA. So
yeah.
I know that's really cynical, but that's the model of marriage at the moment. If you take God out of it, I mean, who would join that line?
Okay, so you are married. It's not easy, and you're on the spiritual journey. And what was the clincher for you?
Yeah, so the turning point for me was being invited on an Alpha course by a rich man. I didn't know it was a Christian course. If anybody had mentioned the word Christian, I would not have gone because I already had a preconceived idea of what a Christian was. And I'd sort of half believed that as long as you do more good than bad in life, if there is a God, you go up there to be judged. He says, okay, these are the scales. You're doing all right, son. Away you go. My wife always identified as a Christian. I liked that she was more moral than me. There's no doubt about that. But like I say, once a rich man invited me on an Alpha course and I was able to speak to vicars and curates about what they do in a church, I thought it was all hatch, match, dispatch, births, weddings, funerals. It was a business. A church was where misfits fit. It's a crutch for cripples. It's where you get your place in space. I didn't believe any of this stuff, but it was there that I first heard the gospel. And it was about that time, Simon, I didn't mention it earlier, that we decided to get married. I believe that God was on our tail then, even before I'd made a full commitment to it. Because when we got married, everything started to change. God started to bless our relationship. We got married in a church. And I just felt a real security that I didn't feel before. Things started to change. But it was the Alpha course where somebody told me the gospel, and it offended me. And I was like, what do you mean I'm a sinner? I couldn't wrap my head around that. And then they explained what a sinner was. And that, repentance means just you've gone your own way, chasing things in the world. God has a plan on your life. And as much as you keep trying to derive your identity from being somebody and proving yourself, the good news of the gospel is you don't have to. Because God loves you. He has a plan on your life, but you are separated from him. And as long as you acknowledge that and you say, sorry for going your own way, come into your life, make me the person you want me to be, everything will change. A whole spiritual dimension will open up that you know nothing about. And I just thought these were outlandish claims, and I've been training all my life for superpowers, with all the bodybuilding and roids and whatever else. And now they're telling me that I can have God's power. God, the Holy Spirit is a person and he comes into your heart and suddenly you'll have a power you know nothing of. And then when they said to me, I said, oh, right, okay, so I'm going to have these superpowers, I'm going to live forever. Anything I've done wrong, it's going to be completely wiped clean. So I'm not going to have to, have any guilt or regret. What's this going to cost me then? When's the bucket come out? When are you going to start shaking a pot? And they were like, well, it's nothing at the point of receiving it, but do you believe it? And it was at that point that I had to really examine the evidence. And I had no idea the amount of tangible evidence that there was of the person of Jesus Christ. And so once I pacified myself, spending the next 6-8 weeks of examining that evidence, it started to dawn on me that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. But even knowing that, I still struggled, Simon, with actually submitting to that. Because I still felt somewhere I'm going to be taken for a ride. I think there's so many half-truths out there. Yeah. So many different cults, so many different places where you can really humiliate yourself. You can really end up in a bad place that I was like, you can't take this risk. You can't risk believing in something that you can't see, surely. But I did. And my life was completely transformed. And so was my wife's life, and so was my kids' lives. And everything changed after saying a prayer 7 years ago.
Beautiful. So that was 7 years. Wow. And so, go on, what are you up to now?
Well, interestingly enough, when people used to ask me about Gladiators and the show was finished, it used to irritate me in the end because I used to think, I'm not public property. I'm not making any money out of this. I don't want to talk about a show, the good old days. These days I'm trying to build houses. But I really felt that as somebody, took the effort to and actually was intentional and brave enough to share the gospel with me without just saying, look, God loves you, Jesus loves you. They told me why, and they told me that I had to do something about it. And so that really got to me, and I thought, well, actually, if the kingdom of God is at hand, why am I building my own empire? All empires crumble. I've been doing this for years. This is madness. There's no luggage racks on a hearse. It'll all be taken away from me. I need to build God's kingdom. So I need to do what Jesus told me to do, which is go and share the gospel. And it's incredible, Simon, the opportunities since then that he's given me to do that. We've got organised now. We've formed a charity 3 years ago called Ace Active, which is active Christian evangelism. So we're being active about it. I noticed a lot of sharing the gospel was a bit half-hearted. I went on some missions and stuff, and we sort of stood in a street and it was raining, and people thought that we could be, Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons and these things. And I'm like, hang on a minute, what we're doing here? This is a consumer culture. People have only got the weekends. They're blinded by the busyness of life. We must, up our game and do things that are going to interest them if we want them to listen to what we've got to say. And so God's really using the Gladiator story. And I don't just mean, a reality TV show that was on 20 years ago. I mean the real Gladiator story. Mm-hmm. I mean the fact that in Rome, there was this plural society like there is now, all these different gods, everyone at war with each other, then believing that justice was revenge, get in that Colosseum and kill the other person and win your freedom. And that was the arrival of Jesus Christ. That's when God decided to reveal himself to people, come as flesh and say, listen, stop killing each other. We've got to forgive each other. The kingdom of God is at hand now. You're in the golden age of God. I have come and you're going to be able to do what I can do and more. And then he's doing these miracles. I'm like, whoa, this is incredible. We are born in the most exciting time in human history. And I had no idea. Amen. So it's incredible now because pre-pandemic, I was able to go into I was getting lots of invites into schools and on missions and sharing the real Gladiator story, talking about reality TV, especially now, Simon, with these youngsters, they're exposed to so much filth through their mobile phones, this, so much commercial advertising being forced on them. Kids are being told 24/7 they are not good enough. We're in this society that tolerates everything, but the trouble with tolerating everything is it means to bear, the word tolerate, if you look at the definition of it, it means to bear something that's harmful and contrary to the truth. So in that, truth can't get through. But the beauty about being able to share the Gladiator story and the beauty about Christianity is it's not a religion. You're not recruiting people. I'm just simply going in, sharing a factual story of the arrival of Jesus, of the fact that his teachings ended the Gladiator games, and if they hadn't, we'd still have Colosseums now and we'd be fighting each other to the death. Yeah. And the fact that, the whole world is counting in unison. It's 2021 years since Jesus came and he's coming back. Yeah. And it's exciting because he can fill you with the Holy Spirit. He has a great plan on your life. The world might tell you you're not good enough, but you are. You're unique and God's created you for a purpose. So that is a massive blessing for me to be able to do that and to be able to go and share that. And ultimately, my mental age is about 11, I think. So to be able to take all the take all the Gladiator games out as well. We talk about God's providence. We have a whole Gladiator show that we take with us. We do family outreach days. I really do believe, Simon, that, there's a real demoralization of society, with as we were talking about marriage and stuff, there, a real attack on families and that. So we try and set up big fun days with churches, work with them, go into schools, try and explain to people, look, a church is not here to recruit you. It's the hub of the community. Yeah. It's here to bless you. So finding ways of blessing communities, bringing them back together, getting behind families and helping them and these things. So there's just, as there's so much to be done.
Yeah, mate, that sounds just brilliant. And look, what I would love out of this is that people are listening thinking, right, I want to get into my church. I want to get into my community. And so let's do it. Get in touch with Warren. Warren, give us all the details where people can get in touch with you.
aceactive.org.
Brilliant.
So on that website, you will find my phone number. You'll get my email address. And absolutely. Let's come down. Let's do some gladiator fighting.
Let's get you seriously busy. So aceactive.org. And I've already been in touch with the school chaplain my kids are at. I want you to come over here, and I'd love to get you seriously busy in the coming post-lockdown season. Mate, it's been so good to have you. I really appreciate it. So thanks for being with us on Inspired. People, I hope you've been inspired. And next week, we're going to have someone, our next guest is going to be superb. Likewise, fascinating, all these different sort of spheres and journeys that people have had, but the commonality is that their lives have been positively wrecked by Jesus. So see you next week. Could you sign up for the podcast, give us a 5-star review? You can be in touch with me on any of the simongilbo.com or various social media platforms. But it's goodbye from me and Warren. See you, buddy. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Simon. It's my pleasure.